Before the worlds began, you were always there. You are Alpha and Omega, beginning and the end. Awesome. Hello and welcome to the LivingWell broadcast. My name is Dr. Mitchell-Samon. I'm a primary care physician and I'm also board certified in internal medicine. My goal with the broadcast is to provide a way for you to send in questions that you may have regarding your medical care. It's not easy sometimes to get the answers that you need. Sometimes we're not even sure what's the right question to ask. So I'm hoping that this broadcast will help give you information that's helpful, that will help guide you along the journey towards better health. In 3 John verse 2, it says, "Dear friend, I hope that all is well with you, and that you are as healthy in body as you are strong in spirit." God wants us to be healthy in our bodies, our soul, and our spirit. And my goal is to guide you by giving some answers to questions that you may have so that you can make a better decision about your health. There's nothing like getting a good understanding of what's going on. So send in your questions and I'll do my best to answer them. So welcome and let's get into today's broadcast. Hello again, my LivingWell friends. It's so good that you've joined us today. I'm honored to be able to share more information with you regarding your health. I hope that you can appreciate the information. The Bible says that my people are destroyed because of lack of knowledge. And it's important to know what's happening so you can do the right thing. And if something is adversely affecting you, you want to know what you can do to change that. So today, the topic that we're covering is diabetes. This is a very broad topic and affects millions of people in America. But we will touch on some things today, and what I'm not able to cover in this broadcast, I may pick up in a future broadcast. So let's start off with diabetes. What is it? It's where your body is not able to control the amount of sugar that's in your blood. You know, when we eat things and when we eat and drink things, the things that have sugar in it, your body produces a hormone called insulin that takes that sugar to your cells to use it for fuel. And so in diabetes, there's a problem with the insulin. There's type 1 diabetes and type 2 diabetes. The most common form is type 2 diabetes, which will be the focus of today's show. I do want to mention a little bit about type 1 diabetes. In type 1 diabetes, your body is not able to produce any insulin at all. And this may happen in children as well as in adults, but it's definitely more common in children. Type 2 diabetes, on the other hand, is where your body is producing some insulin, but it's not enough to compensate for the sugar or starches that we're consuming. So as I said before, when you eat something that's sweet, the insulin takes that sugar to your cells to use as fuel. This also happens when you eat something starchy. So a carbohydrate like bread, pasta, potatoes, that actually converts into sugar. And that same insulin is responsible for taking it to the cells so you can get some fuel. So, you know, athletes, sometimes before they have to run a race, they'll consume something that's high in sugar because your cells need that fuel. In type 2 insulin, in type 2 diabetes, sometimes the pancreas gets kind of tired because we've eaten so much sweets and starchy foods over the years that your pancreas cannot keep up with the amount of insulin that's needed to regulate that. There's also a risk of diabetes when you are overweight because there are more cells to feed, like that fat layer I hate to say it like that, but that fat layer requires energy. That becomes like another organ onto itself. And so you're requiring more insulin to feed that fat layer. So here we go again, talking about the diet, right? But it's a good thing because the consequences of diabetes are not good. And if we can do something to reverse it or improve it, we want to do that. Diabetes is a slow onset disease for the most part. Symptoms that you may notice would be that you're thirsty all the time or hungry all the time. You may also have frequent urination. You can have sudden weight loss without trying to lose weight. That's another sign of new onset diabetes. Or feeling tired, blurred vision. You may have skin sores that are slow to heal, frequent infections, or the skin on in your armpits and on your neck becomes very dark. Those are some signs that may want you to get checked for diabetes. Now, the definition of diabetes is when they draw your blood and they check your fasting blood sugar. That means you have not had anything to eat or drink for at least 8 to 10 hours. If that fasting blood sugar is 126 or higher, that's a definition of diabetes. There's also another test called the A1C. It's hemoglobin A1C, but most of us have heard of it as A1C. This test actually checks the sugar that's attached to your red blood cells. So your bone marrow produces your cells that flow in your blood, your red blood cells, your white blood cells, and your platelets. So sugar actually sticks to the surface of red blood cells. And your bone marrow, when it produces a red blood cell, it lasts in your bloodstream for about 3 months. So by measuring the amount of sugar that's on the red blood cell surface, it tells you the average of your sugar over the previous 3 months. And that's what the A1C test is. So if that A1C test is 6.5 or higher, that's another indication of diabetes. Another indication of diabetes is if you test your blood sugar and you have eaten already and it's over 200. So 3 ways. Your fasting blood sugar is 126 or higher. Your A1C is 6.5 or higher. Or your random blood sugar is over 200. Now, if you've ever gone to a doctor and they did your, annual screenings and it came back showing that you are pre-diabetic, that is where your A1C is somewhere between 5.7 and 6.4. You can decide that I rebuke that, which you should, but in addition to rebuking it, there are some action steps that you need to take. This is like a warning light going off in your car. You don't want to ignore it. You want to do what you can quickly to reverse that stage of pre-diabetes. So your action plan should definitely be to reassess what you've been eating. Am I eating too much sweets, candy, cake, cookies, pies? Or am I drinking a lot of sodas? A lot of people don't realize the amount of sugar that's in a soda or in even fruit juices. You would think that fruit juices are healthy for you, but they are loaded with sugar. And so you want to be careful with that. In the summertime, I've had patients that by the end of the summer, they were a diabetic. And they were not a diabetic the previous year. And when you check it out, they've been eating a lot of fruits that are high in sugar. So you'd think fruits are great, and they are, but there are certain fruits that are not so great. So in the summertime, when people are eating a lot of watermelon, or during the year eating a lot of oranges, drinking a lot of juices and drinking a lot of sodas, that's a lot of times when patients become diabetic. So you want to be very careful with your intake of sweets and then the starchy foods, which are your breads, potatoes, pasta, all the things we love, you know. So with a diabetic, it doesn't mean that you cannot eat any of these things, but when you do eat, let's say a slice of cake, that replaces your meal. So you're only, you're supposed to limit the amount of calories that you have per meal. And that slice of cake was your entire meal. So you have to be careful where you don't eat a full meal and then drink some juice or some soda behind it and then have dessert too. So there are limitations with the amount of calories that you should take in if you're a diabetic. Now, there are different, I would call them stages of type 2 diabetes. We talked about pre-diabetes, where you're not a diabetic at this point, but you are at risk of becoming a diabetic, and there are things that you should do to reverse that. So then if your numbers actually meet the criteria for diabetes, but they're not high enough to put you on medications, your doctor would suggest lifestyle changes, such as the diet and the exercise. So your diabetes is diet controlled. Then the next phase is if the lifestyle changes aren't working or you're not able to comply with the lifestyle changes, then they may put you on pills. And then if your pills aren't sufficient to control your diabetes, then the next stage is insulin, which you have to inject. Now, I've had patients who are diabetic, but because they're not on medications, they think that they don't have diabetes, or they're on a pill. Most commonly it would be something like metformin. And because they're not on insulin, they think they don't have diabetes. So the question is, which one is a diabetic? One that is diet controlled, one that's on pills, or one that's on insulin? All three are diabetics, but needing different levels of care. So there are frequent misunderstandings regarding diabetes. I've had patients that they've had diabetes. I've told them that they have diabetes. They're coming in, every 3 to 4 months to see me, and I discuss their diabetes numbers and their A1C. And I had this happen to me where a patient received a letter from his insurance regarding his diabetes, and he was shocked. After I had been seeing him for 3 to 4 years and discussing diabetes at every visit, he brought the letter in saying, "It's official. It's official. I'm diabetic." And I'm scratching my head going, where did I miss that? Because the purpose of every visit has been to manage the diabetes. So I don't know what it is about that, where sometimes I guess it's a hard thing for patients to accept. And so that's a myth. I've also had patients that have been on pills for diabetes, and then they ended up where the sugar got really out of control and they had to be put on insulin. And then they realized that they have diabetes. They didn't think they had diabetes before because they were only on pills. That's another myth. So your diabetes may be controlled with diet if you're at that stage. It may be controlled with pills, or it may be controlled with insulin, or a combination of pills and insulin. Again, I'm talking about type 2 diabetes. Patients who have type 1 diabetes cannot be treated with pills. They have no insulin whatsoever. So they have to have insulin from the very beginning. There are some people who are diagnosed with type 2 diabetes at a stage where their sugars are really out of control and they have to start with insulin. Those patients may need insulin long term, but there may be some that are able to reverse it and get back off insulin and onto pills or even onto diet. So, when people get diagnosed with diabetes, It's not a good thing, but in the sense of comparing it to a lot of other diseases, this one, you have more control over it in general. So it's not like, some things where you have no control on what happens to you. With diabetes, a lot of the um, outcome is dependent on what you do. You're in the driver's seat when it comes to diabetes. So again, getting informed is also very important. I'm speaking to people thinking that you are going to your doctors at least once a year and getting checkups. But if you haven't been, it's a great time to start because, again, you want to catch things and nip it in the bud, as they say. You want to catch things early so that you can do something about your situation. I have had questions that I'd like to address today. One of them is my blood sugar the same as my A1C? So just to reiterate what I had said earlier, your blood sugar is actually when they prick your finger or if they draw blood from your arm and test your blood sugar, that's actually telling you what the blood sugar is at the moment that the blood is drawn. So right now, your blood sugar is this 126, or it's 98, or it's 325. That's your blood sugar at the moment that the blood was drawn. And that fluctuates throughout the day. So it may change after you eat because after you eat, your blood sugar is going to go up. Then the A1C, as I said before, is giving you the average of your daily blood sugar over the previous 3 months. And if that's 6.5 or higher, that tells us that on most days, your blood sugar is running higher than it should be. Another question that I've heard, or a statement that I've heard is, well, when I eat, cake, I go ahead and drink a lot of water behind it so I can flush it out. And some of you are probably laughing right now because you may be guilty of that. When you start eating, the body immediately starts absorbing the food. So as soon as it hits your stomach, it starts absorbing into your bloodstream right away. So drinking a lot of water after you've eaten the cake and the ice cream does not flush out the blood sugar out of your body. I hate to tell you that, but that's the truth. So you have to, whatever you eat is going into your bloodstream. You've heard the phrase, right? You are what you eat. And that's true. God designed us so well that your food is being absorbed immediately, and different hormones go to work to break it down into the components that your cells need. So your cells they do need sugar, but don't give them too much sugar, because when you give them too much sugar, they can't absorb it, and so it stays in your blood, and that's what causes the blood sugar in your bloodstream to be higher than it should be. Now, there are other things that you can do besides diet. As I said before, if you are overweight, losing weight is an absolutely great way to get your blood sugar under control. Because as I said before, in addition to your liver, your kidneys, your heart, your brain, all of those things need sugar. Your muscles need sugar. When you have an excess layer of fat, the fat becomes an organ that also requires the sugar. It's like, bring it to me, I need it. And so you're giving your body another organ, a layer of fat, and your insulin is not enough to compensate for that. So if you're able to get some weight off by, again, watching what you eat, but also exercise. Exercise is an excellent way to improve your body's metabolism and how it breaks down the sugar. And by losing weight, you're giving it a less, you're giving your body less cells that it has to feed, and requiring less energy from sugar. So diet and exercise are two favorite words on this program, are your friends. We may not feel motivated to do it. I know that feeling. but it's important that we do it for the sake of the health of our bodies. I do want to share a couple of scriptures with you. The first one is in 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 23. And this is from the New Living Translation. It says, "You say, I am allowed to do anything, but not everything is good for you. You say, I am allowed to do anything, but not everything is beneficial." Now, we know the context that this scripture was in. I don't want to take things out of context. In this chapter, it is talking more so about eating food that was offered to idols. And the Christians in that time had questions about that. Should I eat food that was offered to idols? And here Paul was saying that, God has given us free choice and we can do just about anything that we want to do, but not everything is good for us. And so he was relating this to, new believers that may be confused when they see a believer eating something that was offered to idols. And he didn't want the new believer to become confused about that. So he's telling those that are mature believers that, yes, you can really eat those things because you know the source of the food and you're not worshiping the idols. But if what you're doing is going to confuse your brother or sister who's not yet mature in the Lord with those things, then don't do it. So he's saying here, we're allowed to do and eat everything we want to, but not everything is necessary. So when you're eating, think about the scripture. I love my cake, but is it necessary for me to eat this today? And your brain is going to say, yes, it is. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. But if you think about it, what are the long-term effects of what you're eating? And am I going to be able to continue doing the work that God has assigned to me with the energy that I need to have to do it? So that's 1 Corinthians 10, verse 23. You say I'm allowed to do anything, but not everything is good for you. You say I am allowed to do anything, but not everything is beneficial. So keep that in mind. And you say, well, I don't use scriptures when I eat my food. I'm just eating. And I can understand that. But look at verse 30 in that same chapter. It says, if I can thank God for the food and enjoy it, why should I be condemned for eating it? In other words, Dr. Simone, why are you bothering me about what I'm eating? But here's verse 31. It says, so whether you eat or drink or whatever you do it all for the glory of God. I know most of us have never, ever related our diet and what we do in relation to giving God glory. But do you know that sinners are looking at us as believers? And no, we may not be drinking alcohol and we may not be fornicating and we're not going out stealing and murdering. But they look at the church people and they say, these people, all they do is go to church and eat. And that's not a good reputation for people that belong to God. We want to represent him not only with our worship and our praise, but we want to represent him with our life. And people look, I know unbelievers can find several reasons as to why they won't give their life to the Lord. But some of the things that they do say are valid. And they see that we go to church and we come out and we eat. We go to church and we come home and we eat and we eat and we eat. And so let's not make that the reputation for saints. Let us be representative of a God who's the God of wisdom, a God who gives us temperance in all things, some self-control. We're not slaves to food. My father used to say from the pulpit that we're digging a grave with our teeth. And I don't like that statement, and a lot of people didn't, but he was telling the truth. Digging your grave with your teeth by just eating uncontrollably. We want to get a handle on that. Um, that's something you can pray about if that's an issue for you, where you just have trouble with self-control. Sometimes there's an underlying reason why we're either overeating or eating the wrong things. Some people, their reaction to grief and depression is to eat. There's lots of comfort foods, the mashed potatoes, the fried chicken, the pies and the cakes and the cookies, comfort foods. But after you get the comfort food and then you go and sleep on it, you have another problem. So ask God to show you how to give your cares to Him. Pray about the eating habits. Lord, help me to have some self-control. And some of that, of course, starts with your decision in your mind that today I'm making a change in my eating habits. Before you go to the grocery store, make sure that you're not going there hungry. Eat something, hopefully something healthy, and then go to the grocery store. Because as you know, if you go into the grocery store when you're hungry, everything looks good and you're going to buy things that you don't need to buy. Make a grocery list. Look online for healthy meals that you can prepare, healthier snacks that you can eat instead of the potato chips. Have you tried something like just hummus with some low salt crackers? Or, I'm not a big celery eater, but if you add some hummus to that, it's pretty good. And so look online for some ways to include more vegetables and less starchy foods into your diet and less sweets. After eating certain foods, you do want something sweet, especially if your body has been trained to do that. But why not try eating a few grapes or some apples? If you have to have, this is a very common question. As a diabetic, what can I drink? And when I was in training as a medical student, we were asked to do a diabetic diet for 1 week. And the toughest thing for that diet for me was what to drink, because you ended up just drinking water. And if you're one of those people that you don't like water or you just need some flavor, what I would recommend is, instead of getting a whole glass of juice, maybe put less than a quarter amount of juice in that glass and then dilute it with water for the rest to fill up the glass. And that way you're consuming less sugar. That's different from drinking a whole can of soda or eating this cake and pie and then following it with water, because the amount of sugar that you put in is the amount of sugar that you put in. You don't dilute it by putting in a ton of sugar and then adding water after that. So by getting a little flavor in your water, you can put a little bit of juice, less than a quarter of the glass with juice and the rest water. Do that once for the day. And then the rest of the time, your beverage needs to be water. I hope I have said something today that is helpful. I hope it has also generated some questions. I'm looking forward to hearing from you. Send your questions to livingwellmd123@gmail.com. That's livingwell, one word, LivingWell, MD123@gmail.com. God bless you, and until next time, continue to live well.
Before the worlds began, you were always there. You are Alpha and Omega, beginning and the end.
You have been listening to the Living Well broadcast with Dr. Levonne-Samon. I hope that you heard something today that you found helpful and that will help you get better and live better. If you have questions about your health, your medications, or treatment plan, please send them to livingwellmd123@gmail.com. That's livingwellmd123@gmail.com. I will do my best to address them at a future broadcast. You can find me here on Awesome Radio on the first Saturday of each month at 12 noon. I look forward to speaking with you again at that time. And until then, live well and God